director of digital. And it was really just putting all of our thoughts into a couple of pages that we could reference every once in a while to keep our voice and tone in check regardless of the circumstances, kind of always remember who we are, but also so that anybody coming into our organization, so since then we've brought on a social media producer, we've brought on a social media intern. We want to make sure that consistency is a really big part of our voice. So whether it's myself that's sending a message on Instagram or Twitter, or whether it's one of the other two people I mentioned, that you can't tell the difference. So really what we've outlined in that document just kind of goes back to when you think about the Chicago Bears of yesterday, back in the day, maybe not necessarily right now.
Before social media
But you think about tough, think about passionate fans in Chicago. We try and be humble. So those are words that whenever we're tweeting, we kind of check ourselves on and say, regardless again of the circumstances, like, is that the tone that we're conveying? And we try and be consistent in that message.
So one of my favorite social media accounts for teams, I've been in Vegas the last year, is the Vegas Golden Knights Twitter account. Is anybody familiar with that? Kind of fun, kind of cheeky, and that's kind of what I was asking. I was like, to me that had a very distinct view on things. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is the guy's out of work now, is what the word is out of Vegas. So, Brad, what's your social voice, and how do you keep from getting fired, I guess, is the question, which is,
Well, I think that's actually two very different questions, two very different answers. So a little bit of my background just is kind of a context for this answer. Before I was with the White Sox, this is my fourth season now. We're actually in the season. I came from the Chicago Blackhawks, so I was there for 2 Stanley Cups. We made another run to the Western Conference Final. We lost in Game 7. So we were very much, a brand on the move. We were a rising brand. And all we heard all the time was, why can't you be more like the LA Kings? The LA Kings were the grandfather or the father of the Vegas Knights Twitter tone now. And I think, to echo kind of what everyone else has said on the stage so far, is you've got to stay true to your brand. We were a heritage brand. We're still, I'm with the White Sox now. We have 100 years of history behind us. And of course that means finding what all of that history means recontextualized for social media. But it also doesn't mean we're going to go out and attack everybody that we possibly can. There's some teams who do that really well, and it's great. Back, yeah. And it's great when you're it's great when you're winning. It's fantastic, and I'll even I heard there was someone from Kansas City in the back on the last panel. So perfect example was yesterday was our opening day. We went down 4-0 in the first inning, and the KC Royals posted on Twitter, 3 innings into a 9-inning game, how do you like those first 3 innings, 4-0? Well, 4th inning rolls around, and we start a run where we take back and score 14 unanswered runs. And we were able to then tweet back, we kind of like the next 3 innings a little bit better. So it's staying within where you feel comfortable. Like you can, have fun conversing with other teams. You can have kind of poke fun and needle a little bit because you're still in a competitive game. There's going to be a winner and a loser at the end of every game. But you've also got to kind of know where that limit is and where you're comfortable putting your brand, because, like I said, it's great when you're winning, and when you're not, being the guy who's going to speak truth to power isn't always going to get you a lot of fans.
But just to be clear, because these guys are saying, well, how do I make this happen for my station? When I was at the Tribune, we came up with an avatar called Colonel Tribune. Came up with a complete backstory for the guy, right? And so I know that kind of avatar may not work for your brands, but like, Jen, do you have written out on a piece of paper somewhere where you and your 2 or 3 assistants, is that right? It's articulated exactly the attitude, what where you want to be on your posts?
I would say it is a little bit, but of course, like, I think one of the great things about social media is it's gray, and you're never going to be able to make it completely black and white, and circumstances are going to change, not even from, one game to the next, but every day. There's days where I walk into the office, I'm like, today's going to be a great day, nothing bad can happen, and then who knows what kind of news breaks where it just totally changes the course of your day and the context of your content that day. So I think one thing you really have to learn to do is to just be nimble and ride that wave, and never, just be flexible. Never get set in your ways and say that regardless, this is the way that I'm going to act and I'm going to behave. You have to listen to your audience, listen to your fans. I do that often. I have my TweetDeck open all the time, and I'm constantly kind of gauging how our fans are feeling about something like free agency that just happened, and I'm using their tone to determine my tone and how I'm talking to them a lot. And then I would also say that throughout the hiring process, I really feel like we did a great job of bringing people on board who all of our personalities mesh well together. And I think that's where a lot of our success, I can attribute it back to, is the fact that because we really made sure that we brought the right person on who got it from the get-go. Yes, there's of course training required and feedback required, but somebody who really understood our voice in the first place and that we worked well with, I think you can see that across our social media platforms, how that translates.
So that might be so there's guidelines for the brand, but then do you have social media straight up rules of the road for your own team, but also the players?
So for my team, we don't have rules. I think what Jen said a minute ago about coming in every morning and it kind of being like a clean slate couldn't be true. I often say working in digital for a team it kind of feels like you're in risk management. You come in every day hoping for the best, but ready for the worst. And, you might have a big partnership commitment. We might have some branded content going out, and in the morning there's a rumor that X is going to be traded. We can't do anything that day. You sit back, you wait for the tide to go, and then you kind of jump in. So we don't have black and white rules because the world doesn't exist that way. But we have voice rules. So we call it the 6 tenets. And I think it was Brad just saying this, but I couldn't agree more. Like, we get asked all the time, why aren't you more like the Atlanta Hawks or the Sacramento Kings? And they are so irreverent and tongue-in-cheek, and it's just not who the Bulls are. Like, we could do that on Twitter, but it'd be very weird to do that on Twitter, and then you come to a game and it's this more iconic, legendary type brand. So we have to kind of make sure we're reflecting that on social. So we have 6 traits. We call it HITTED, but with 2 I's with no E, because we couldn't figure out how to spell a word with HITTID. And it's human, iconic, timely, thumb-stopping, inclusive, and differentiated. So every piece of content should be at least 3 of those 6. Nothing should ever be completely against those 6. So if you ever do something that, like we talk a lot about the big thing with the Bulls brands, if you go to a Bulls game, there's no stereotypical Bulls fan. Like, you see every age, every colour, every gender, just complete mix of people. So we should never do something that feels like it's only talking to guys, only talking to girls, only talking to younger fans, older fans. Differentiated for us is huge. It's, in a way, we're kind of competing with the media. Like, we know that there's only so much attention for sports out there. And so we have to think about, why are you following the Bulls rather than any of the other media outlets that are out there? And that's the traditional media outlets, as well as that there's dozens of Bulls fan accounts that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of followers. So differentiator for us is, what are we giving fans that they can't get elsewhere? So we have those 6 kind of pillars, and we try and make sure that everything hits 3 to 4 of them, and that gives the team, because we're the same, we have 2 full-time underneath it, and we have 2 to 3 seasonals at any given point, so we can have 6 to 7 people publishing content as the Bulls. So you really have to make sure that you don't slow down, so you can't have complete black and white rules that stops it, but you need to give them some guide rails so that it doesn't feel like, oh, Dan's tweeting today and then Lino's tweeting tomorrow.
So, Brad, you do not coach the players? They just do what they do? Because these guys here are sitting there, well, like a player, for them, their hosts are like their players, right? You can't stop them. You can just try to contain them, is sort of the old rule, right?
No, I mean, and we do a lot of media training with all of our players, and it's an even bigger challenge, on the baseball side, especially because you're thinking major leagues all the way down to rookie ball. All of them have the power with, one tweet to say something great or, get themselves in a little bit of trouble. So we do work with them really closely, and you know, the best way to kind of talk about it sometimes is by showing things that were really successful and some things that weren't as successful. You know, I think, you know, from a White Sox standpoint, we're at a point right now where we now have a clubhouse full of guys who are young, who have grown up and seen, you know, the players who came before them go through some of the trial and error on social media. So when Tim Anderson starts tweeting, he knows that, you know, he's where he is personally comfortable talking. He's great in the community. He's got a great family. You know, he loves posting photos of his daughter and his wife. You know, they know kind of where they're most comfortable. And I think the worst thing that we can do as someone who's, you know, working in digital for a team is kind of going down and saying, you should post about this. You shouldn't post about this. And sometimes there are really good reasons why they should or shouldn't. But, you know, if it's not true and the human standpoint of what Dan talked about just a moment ago, if it's not authentic, if it's not human, I would say people now are even so much more savvy on it than where they were a year or two ago, where, you know, we you know, back in the infancy, and I've been in social media and sports for 10 years now, you know, back in the day when Twitter was just starting up, we probably could have tweeted for some of the players and gotten away with it. We didn't, but, you know, it was still in its infancy, so we probably could have, you know, given them what we wanted them to say and they would have done it. Now it just wouldn't sound right. It wouldn't sound like it was coming from Tim Anderson or Yolmer Sanchez or any of those guys.
Yeah, you're totally right. That probably happened a lot back then. Now you wouldn't even think of doing it, I would think, right? Jen, what is a perfect social media post look like? I mean, what do you know when you just killed it? Like, what are you looking for? I mean,
I think the first word that jumps into my head out of everything is something that is authentic. Something that really, as soon as I get that piece of content in my hands and I come up with the copy for it and I know that this is the right copy, this is it, and it goes out the door, those are the ones that tend to, I feel like, have the most success. When you can, inject, I think, your personality and a little bit of humor into it in a right way. I mean, the Bears, like, we definitely haven't been in a position on the field where we can have a lot of tongue-in-cheek fun, but we certainly pick our battles when we think there's an opportunity to do so. Now, some of those battles we've won, some of those battles I've lost, and it's been talked about and written about, I'm sure, by a lot of you guys at times, but I think we take those types of chances. So really it goes back to the content itself. We're really trying to push the limit and create really thumb-stopping graphics, thumb-stopping video. I mean, there's, you know, so much content out there nowadays that my first goal is always to make sure that when you're scrolling through your phone, you're stopping on a Bears post because that image is grabbing your attention for whatever reason. The second part of that is then making sure that the copy